Lessons learned at 4,500 feet. A Vermont native who's been flying planes for 40 years is now a published author. Celine McArthur sat down with Adam Alpert to hear some of the stories that inspired his book, We Have No Crash Policy.
Adam, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
The name of your book is We Have a No Crash Policy. Tell me about the book.
So the book is largely a memoir. The stories that are contained within relate to experiences that I've had throughout my flying career and throughout the experiences I've enjoyed through aviation, but also stories about other interesting aspects of life, relationships, for example, what it's like to be married to a pilot, or married to somebody who's afraid of flying, potentially, or perhaps, just dating somebody who's afraid of flying.
In the book, he shares real-life lessons about what does and doesn't work if you want to keep relationships soaring. For example, he lost Loretta after taking her on a flight where the engine caught fire.
But happily, in this case, I was able to return to the airport safely, and with the help of the rescue team, extinguish the fire. All were safe. Now, I would consider that to be a success.
But your relationship burned to the ground.
Yes, that's sadly true. That was really our last date. It did up my, I think it upped my empathy for people who maybe are apprehensive about flying, maybe objectively fear it. And the title of the book actually stems from that idea. We have a no crash policy. This sounds maybe a little improbable, but when I would encounter a passenger that exhibited signs of worry or outright fear, I would remind them that we have a no crash policy, and surprisingly, they would relax, be maybe at ease, even enjoy the flight to some extent. And, seeing this work once convinced me that it may be really sort of a panacea, and I have found that that if your passenger charges believe you really have a no crash policy, and objectively I do.
Why wouldn't you?
They're much more willing to go with you, and actually my experience is that they tend to have a pretty good time.
He remembered that experience and learned a few more lessons years later on a flight over the Champlain Valley with his wife.
And on that particular day, we were out, I would say, for a pleasure flight. At least it started out that way, with the plan to make a water landing in Charlotte, Vermont. Unfortunately, we had a mechanical failure of the hydraulic system right in the process of conducting that landing. Unfortunately, detected the problem early enough so we could abort, but it put the aircraft in a very dangerous situation with the landing gears not quite retracted and not deployed either, firmly locked. And so we spent a very long time trying to address that problem. I use we here because my wife, Gisela, was with me. And if ever you wanted to test a relationship, see how strong your marriage is, subject your spouse to an emergency landing in a 1944 vintage World War II aircraft.
How did she react?
Well, I would give her very high points, personally. Now, she did attempt to change her will. I'm not exactly sure how, but she was on the phone with somebody talking about addressing estate planning.
On the plane?
On the plane while I was trying to solve this problem. But in fairness to her, we worked together as a team, and actually, to Gisela's credit, in order for me to be successful resolving the problem, she actually had to fly the airplane for a time. So if you've ever experienced the challenge of teaching your spouse something, imagine a pressure cooker environment of, we're going to die, kind of like takes it up a notch. But Gisela was very reasonable, I would say, and loving in her willingness to accept
survive with you.
Well, accept instruction. I wasn't going to say that. I think she had some self-preservation there too. I think she wanted both of us to survive, although at times I'm not sure it came across as lovingly as it maybe ideally should. But we worked together and ultimately were able to resolve the problem. I'm happy to report all souls were saved and the aircraft lives to fly another day.
Still married?
Oh, yes.
I'm a little nervous to ask that.
We're at 19 years now.
Congratulations, that is
Thank you.
wonderful.
Because there's often more than one side of the story, I asked his wife Gisela her take on the day.
It was pretty dire at the time. We didn't know if we were going to make it or not. For hours, he taught me how to fly, which as a brand new, having flown a plane, this plane was quite heavy. It's an old warplane. And I did my best, and I kept it up, and he was in the back trying to hammer the landing gear down. And it took us hours. We were going up and down Lake Champlain and not knowing if we could get it to come down. But seeing as that we have a no-crash policy, Adam did a great job and got us home safely.
I think the most important thing, and it's surprising it took me as long to learn this, but is that having respect and mutual respect, the way you interact with other people, either in your charge, colleagues, people who are perhaps even superior to you, is a very interesting indicator of success or failure. It's people who have this in kind of an innate emotional intelligence tend to be better pilots, tend to be safer, and I think are more successful individuals just in general. The only difference between sort of the rest of life with flying is flying tends to point this out in a much more dramatic and sometimes violent way because, airplane accidents that result are terrible.
What have you learned in all of this time in terms of relationships?
Well, I would say this.
Because there's some chapters dedicated to that.
It's a little out of context, but, for those guys out there that are thinking the damsels really are living to be rescued, the truth of the matter is they don't want to be put in danger in the first place. And so my advice would be to do whatever you can to make sure that you
Good advice.
don't subject your spouse or your girlfriend or anybody else that you're close to a dangerous situation. Be proactive to avoid that.
It is a great lesson. Another lesson I'd like to ask you about.
Yes.
How hard was it to publish?
If you really want to have the experience of rejection, write a book and try to get it published. But at the end of the day, it was luck that won out.
He knew a couple of Vermont authors who helped him craft a strong letter for publishers and seek out the right one for his book. After 45 rejections, one said yes.
It was a good lesson in perseverance, and actually, if you look at it in terms of kind of the scope of the book, one of the, I think, interesting lessons is that it pays not to give up. And in flying, that's really true. What's the point? You might as well keep fighting that fire or trying to keep control of the aircraft. If you don't, you're going to die or have something terrible happen. If you keep fighting, maybe you'll succeed. Maybe you can save the day.
Adam, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you, Celine.
You can buy the book on Amazon, or you can go to the Milton Artists Guild on Route 7 in Milton. There you can also see the work of the artists who created the illustrations for the book. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great day.